Since the invention of writing, every new form of media that has emerged has faced some sort of controversy for some reason or another. Book bannings and burnings have been a favorite pastime of insecure autocrats the world over for millennia. Walk into Barnes & Noble and they have a display of banned books where the duality of man is perfectly encapsulated by having Captain Underpants and Mouse being sold side by side, because the two things that scare conservatives and school administrators the most are stories about the real-life horrors of Nazism and bald men running around in their tidy whities hypnotizing their thinking they're superheroes. The 1896 film The Kiss, an 18-second silent film featuring two fully clothed consenting adults doing what I can only describe as a middle school couple's first attempt at kissing, was met with widespread outrage and calls for censorship. One critic even wrote, "The spectacle of prolonged pasturing on each other's lips was beastly enough in life-size on the stage, but magnified to gargantuan proportions and repeated 3 times over, it is absolutely disgusting." I can only respond to that by asking, has this guy ever had a real kiss, like a good one? Because this right here is one of the most unerotic things I've watched in a while. I've seen more intense, passionate kisses in G-rated movies. In the mid-20th century, comic books were public enemy number 1. Concerned parents worried about how comic books were going to turn the youth of America into delinquents and criminals. It led to the creation of the Comics Code Authority and oppressively strict censorship and control being imposed on the comic book industry for years. In the 80s, parents irrationally feared that Dungeons & Dragons would funnel their children into the direction of the occult, and now their ire has been turned to video games. Video games, perhaps due to their interactive nature, have been the subject of intense scrutiny by anxious parents, politicians, and the media since they entered the mainstream in the late 70s and early 80s. And have since become the go-to scapegoat for all of America's problems, so politicians have an excuse to point the finger rather than actually doing something like passing common-sense gun laws. And as computers evolve and become more powerful, it paves the way for more realistic and sometimes more graphic games. Now, I'm a gamer. Big shocker, I know. And I'm one to enjoy a good, violent, M-rated game from time to time. Nothing quite like coming home after a stressful day and loading up Doom, turning your brain off, and ripping some demons apart with your bare hands. It upsets me so much when people blame violent video games for people becoming aggressive and violent, because the science is clear. They don't. Study after study has proven this. Personally, I feel like video games are where we should keep our guns. When it comes to the legal side of things, in the 2011 Supreme Court case Brown v. Entertainment Merchants Association, the court struck down a 2005 California law banning the sale of M-rated games to children without parental permission as unconstitutional, ruling in a 7-2 verdict that video games were entitled to the same constitutional protections under the First Amendment as other forms of media. Of course, fucking Clarence Thomas dissented. God damn it, I fucking hate that guy. Sure, while it's illegal for video games to be banned solely off of the nature of their content, several games have been banned from sale in the US because they contain illegal content or code. In 2012, Silicon Knights lost a lawsuit against the creators of the Unreal Engine and Fortnite, Epic Games, after a court found that they had used code from the Unreal Engine 3 illegally without a license from Epic. As such, Silicon Knights was ordered to recall all unsold copies of its games 2 Human and X-Men Destiny, which used the illegal code. Silicon Knights filed for bankruptcy and shut down 2 years later as a result of the lawsuit. In a different case you may be familiar with if you've seen the Scott the Woz video about it, the makers of the Guy game were sued by a woman who appeared naked in the game while she was underage, making it, say it with me now, child pornography! Now personally, I'm of the opinion that using stolen code or child pornography is more than justifiable grounds to ban a game, but when it comes to stuff like gore, violence, and sexual content between adults, that's where I differ. Video games have been a cause of moral panic since the beginning. The 1976 game Death Race puts players in a car and challenges them to run over pixelated gremlins. Ah yes, look at this violence! Honestly, this is about as graphic as a game of Hangman. Game & Watch Vermin is more graphic than this. I didn't know that people in the 70s were that afraid of stick figures, but also this is when pet rocks were popular, so you know, I guess it makes sense. In the 1980s, Nintendo was pretty strict when it came to censorship. It wanted to ensure that everything released on its platform was family friendly. And most game developers just had to suck it up and go along with them, because during the NES era, Nintendo basically had a monopoly over the entire console video game market. Yeah, there was the Master System and the Atari 7800, but come on, the NES was where all the money was at. Nintendo mandated NES and SNES era censorship varied wildly in content and scope. Nintendo of America was incredibly strict about any religious iconography and terminology appearing in their games. This ranged from incredibly minor changes, such as changing the crosses on gravestones and dovetails to the letters RIP, to changing the name of the Bible item in The Legend of Zelda to the Magic Book when it came to the US, or going so far as to completely rename The Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past from its original Japanese title of The Legend of Zelda Triforce of the Gods. Japan is also pretty liberal when it comes to its depiction of sexuality in its media. Over there, it ain't a big deal if a nipple slips into a game here or there, but in America, God forbid your games have titty in them, or even worse, a penis. Anime policy would oftentimes force female characters to cover up should they be scantily clad, and even examples of quote-unquote tasteful nudity like the topless statues on Super Castlevania 4 would be forced to cover it up. Thankfully, Nintendo clearly reversed this stance because in Animal Crossing, an E-rated game, you can get some uncensored Statue of David penis action on. Unfortunately, I can't show it on YouTube. Nintendo was also known to censor graphic violence in games released on their consoles, perhaps the most infamous example of that being when Mortal Kombat was put into the Super Nintendo in 1993. That was the year when the console wars between Nintendo and Sega were at their most heated. Even before its release on home consoles, Mortal Kombat was notorious for its gratuitous levels of graphic violence. The Nintendo version was sanitized and censored, replacing the blood with sweat, and while the Genesis version also had sweat instead of blood by default, you could re-enable the blood and gore by inputting a cheat code. Guess which version of the game sold better? Genesis really does with Nintendo. However, the console release of Mortal Kombat caused the controversy over violence in video games from the console war to boil over in ways we haven't seen since. A man named Bill Anderson was asked by his son to buy him a copy of Mortal Kombat for the Genesis, and when he did, he was appalled by the violent nature of the game's content. He talked to his boss, Connecticut Senator Joseph Lieberman, about the game, and Lieberman was also horrified about the game. Lieberman was also aware of the interactive Sega CD movie Night Trap, in which the player has to protect a party of scantily clad women from vampires that have infiltrated their sleepover. Lieberman opened a congressional hearing about the matter and had representatives from both Sega and Nintendo testify. Lieberman threatened congressional oversight of the video game industry unless they could all come together and self-regulate. He proposed a rating system as a compromise because he knew that banning violent video games outright would violate the First Amendment. Representing Nintendo was NOA Vice President Howard Lincoln, and representing Sega was SOA Vice President Bill White. These hearings turned the intense rivalry between Nintendo and Sega into a nationally televised public spectacle, with Lincoln and White taking every opportunity to step on each other's toes and make themselves look better. Lincoln tried to claim the moral high ground by talking about how Nintendo did in fact censor the Super Nintendo version of Mortal Kombat, and how Night Trap would never be allowed on a Nintendo console. Well, that aged poorly. I don't know, man. It just feels like Sega got pilloried entirely unfairly here. At this point, Sega even had their own rating system in place, and yes, while it wasn't the best, it was basically the original ET and M ratings. Mortal Kombat even has an age rating on the box! Come on, man! At the end of the hearing, Nintendo and Sega both committed to working together to create a rating system to make consumers aware of sexual or violent content in their games. In a subsequent hearing, retailers like Walmart and Toys R Us agreed to only sell games that had received ratings. I personally feel like an age rating system is the best possible compromise because at the same time it allows for the consumer to understand what kind of content to expect from the game, while also limiting the impact on a game developer's creative and artistic freedom and rights to free speech. Of course, there are games rated AO, which none of the major console manufacturers will allow on their platforms. But this is a very small handful of games, and most of them are just porn, so I don't think we're missing out on much. The first AO game ever released was on the Philips CDI and called The Joy of Sex, so I think that says everything you need to know. I'm just gonna rant about this. If you are a parent, and you buy an M-rated game for your child, and you're horrified by what you are seeing, you have no right to complain. You wouldn't send your kid to an R-rated movie alone, would you? Stop expecting game developers to censor content because it's not suitable for your kids. You have no right to complain if you walk in on your kid playing No Russian in Modern Warfare 2 if you were the adult in the house with the money who bought them the game. And no, it's not going to turn your kid into a violent mass murderer. It's more likely just going to scare the kid. I implore all parents of young children watching this, the whole two of you, to actually educate yourselves on what your child is playing and do your own research into what games are and aren't appropriate for your children. Some kids can handle things others can't. Games aren't just for kids, and they haven't been for a long time, and it's your responsibility as a parent to actually try to regulate the games your child plays. At the same time when Nintendo and Sega were getting their feet held to the fire by the US Senate, another game studio was preparing to corrupt the youth of America. In December of 1993, id Software released Doom. This game was awesome. I'm assuming I was not alive when it came out. But I heard it was awesome, and it sold like a gajillion million copies. In it, you took the role of a badass space marine who shot demons and gave zero fucks. It was also incredibly violent and gory. I mean, look at all that pixelated carnage. And while this made it a smash hit with gamers, it didn't with non-gamers. It was dubbed a quote-unquote mass murder simulator by the research group Killology and caught flack from religious groups for its depiction of satanic imagery, which is something I never personally understood. Doom clearly casts the demons as the bad guys, just as how Wolfenstein clearly cast the Nazis as bad guys. You have to have a fundamental misunderstanding of what these games are about in order to come to the conclusion that they even come remotely close to glorifying the groups they so clearly depict as the villains. Also, demons aren't real. I don't know how you can glorify mythical creatures. Does Skyrim glorify dragons? But this just goes to show how little the people who go on Hannity and Tucker Carlson tonight and stoke fears amongst their brainwashed audiences about the dangers of video games actually know about what they're talking about. I bet you Tucker Carlson has never put his hands in a controller and takes the generic term for every video game console is a Nintendo.
Everything you've said makes sense. I haven't seen the social science on it.
Study after study on the impact of violent video games had demonstrated a minimal correlation between video games and the development of violent tendencies in players. A 2020 report published by researchers at Massey University in New Zealand in the journal Royal Society Open Science re-examined 28 studies conducted over the previous 12 years. In it, the researchers write that current research is unable to support the hypothesis that violent video games had a meaningful long-term predictive impact on youth aggression, also writing that studies find long-term impacts of violent video games on youth aggression are near zero. What I find interesting are the games that need to be re-rated post-release. Everybody knows about the GTA San Andreas hot copy mod, where modders re-implemented an unused sex minigame that was found in the game's files and forced Rockstar to re-release a censored version of the game in order to keep its M rating. So I'm not going to delve too much into detail with that one. Nothing like some sweet, fully clothed intercourse. The hot copy controversy led to a major change to the ESRB's policy when it came to assigning games ratings, specifically requiring every file on the disc to be taken account into rating the game, which I find a little over the top. If it's not implemented into the game, why does it matter? Most people aren't going to ever come across that stuff in normal gameplay, and I will tell you from personal experience, having gone to the deepest, darkest parts of Skyrim Nexus, any game popular enough to develop a robust modding community will inevitably have nude and sex mods released for them, and at that point, does it really matter whether the assets were user-generated or taken from the game's files? The end result is the exact same. That being, you get to ogle some polygonal, pixelated boobies. Speaking of which, the Elder Scrolls Oblivion needed to be re-rated, supposedly because of a texture of a bare breast that was found in the game's files and re-implemented into the game via a fan-made nude mod. This is only half true, though. Yes, while the discovery of the scandalous texture did prompt the ESRB to re-evaluate the game, the real reason the game was actually re-rated is because the ESRB discovered that the game's levels of gore were much more graphic than Bethesda had led them to believe when they submitted their application for the game's rating, particularly singling out the levels of detail present in some of the mutilated corpses within the Oblivion gates. A game that was actually re-rated for nudity found within it was the Windows Vista port of Halo 2. By this point, the Xbox version of the game was out for 3 years and had no issues, but the PC version included a level editor which allowed players to see an error message called a .ass error. What's more appropriate than an error called .ass than to be shown a picture of an ass? In response to this discovery, Halo 2 Vista had to be delayed in order for the games to be relabeled with partial nudity, even though it didn't change the game's letter rating as it was already rated M. Let's take a hop over the pond to see what our friends in Europe are doing. Over there, they have a very similar rating system called PEGI, and while there are some differences, it is pretty much analogous to North America's ESRB. However, they have much stricter stances on things such as depictions of gambling. When it was originally released in 2006, New Super Mario Bros. Was given a 3+ rating by PEGI, and come on, it's a Mario game. Who's more family-friendly than Mario? Everybody loves Mario. However, when it was re-released on the Wii U Virtual Console, the game was re-rated to 12+, not because of the part where you drop Bowser into lava and all his flesh melts off as he desperately tries to get out, which scared the shit out of me when I was a kid, but because you can gamble with Luigi. I will admit, I spent too many hours listening to Luigi and poker because I did not know what I was doing. Not to brag though, but going back to it, I'm a fucking beast at Luigi poker. It doesn't help though that Luigi is a cheating bastard who always deals himself the better cards. The same thing happened with Pokemon Gens 1 and 2 when they were re-released, and it's the reason why the Game Corner was removed from Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Damn you, Europe! Within Europe, Germany is known for its own regime of strict censorship. So strict, I even found somebody from the University of Oregon who wrote an entire thesis about Germany's game censorship. Of course, there's stuff like the censorship of Nazi iconography in games like Call of Duty and Wolfenstein, which is completely understandable given Germany's history that probably hits a really sore spot with them. But what I find more interesting is the censorship of violence and gore in games, and while there's so many examples of this that I could make an entire video on German game censorship alone, and if you really want to know more, there's a link to that thesis in the description if you want to give it a read. I'm going to focus on a couple examples involving games developed by Valve. You remember when Valve made video games? I do. In the game Team Fortress 2, there was a special low violence mode in Germany that re-rates the characters to be robots. Instead of bleeding, the characters leak oil, and when they get jibbed, instead of exploding into various body parts, they explode on random objects like rubber ducks, hamburgers, and gears. Similarly, in Half-Life, gore is replaced with mechanical parts like screws, and when an ally is killed, their body fades away rather than lingering there, which practically removes the mechanic where you need to destroy human corpses in order to prevent them from being taken over by headcrabs and becoming zombies. Blood was removed from Portal, and Left 4 Dead 2 was outright refused a rating in Germany and wasn't released uncensored over there until 2021. Germany is the only country in Europe not to follow the PEGI rating scale. However, the EU and the Schengen area complicates Germany's game censorship system because it's pretty easy for a German gamer to buy uncensored versions versions of those games, either from another country or online. Lately, Germany has been relaxing its game censorship policies, and German gamers can now play uncensored versions of the games I previously discussed without issue. In addition, depictions of Nazi iconography and artistic context is now allowed in games and is treated more or less the same way it has been treated for years in the German film industry. So now, you can fuck up some Nazis in Wolfenstein. Hell yeah. All of those games I just talked about, save for Portal, are M-rated here in the States. They were designed with a more mature demographic in mind. It confuses me why they would even bother censoring the levels of violence and gore in games that were designed with adults in mind. This video is getting kind of long. Let's rapid fire a couple more examples of international censorship. Here we go! Miitopia, the cute little family-friendly Nintendo game where you put meets of people you know in wacky situations in a fantasy RPG setting. Rated 18+ in Russia. Why? It's because your Miis could be gay, and Vladimir Putin is a homophobic piece of shit. Same thing happened with Stardew Valley and The Sims when they were released over there. Instant 18+ rating. Fuck you, Vladimir. In the special Chinese edition of Halo the Master Chief Collection, most blood and gore in the game is eliminated completely. Human characters are invincible, corpses fade out instead of lingering on the battlefield, and even some pre-rendered cutscenes like the Gravemind cutscenes were altered in order for the game to be able to be released in China. Lastly, a very recent controversy that I would like to end the video on is with the psychological horror game Martha is Dead. This game was released earlier this year for Windows, PlayStation 4 and 5, and the Xbox One and Xbox Series consoles, and while the versions on PC and Xbox were left uncensored, Sony required the developers to censor some particularly graphic and gruesome scenes in order for the game to be released on PlayStation. And I will admit, I've seen some incredibly graphic scenes from this game that I did not like and was grossed out by. But guess what? Nobody was forcing me to play this game. Let people have their fun. If they're not hurting anybody, why should you care? If you don't like a game, you don't have to play it. It's not Sony or anybody else's place for that matter to stomp all over somebody's artistic expression. Of course, the controversy blew over pretty quickly because Martha is Dead released the day before Elden Ring was, so it was immediately overshadowed by one of the best video games of all time. I am very strongly opposed to most cases of censorship. I do feel like if the content is outright offensive or obscene, there is a case to be made, but when it comes to violence, gore, story themes, sexuality, etc., censorship has no place. Censorship is bad for everybody involved. It tarnishes the artistic intent of the creator, disrespects the personal agency of the consumer to decide for themselves what is appropriate, can potentially stifle the spread of new ideas, and is harmful to the industry as a whole. But what do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and until next time guys, thanks for watching.